welcome back to the Spiro Avenue Show. Justin Spiro. You know, I have been basically harassed into oblivion about the lack of Detroit Pistons content, and I got to say, I put most of the blame on James Edwards III, who has left me on red multiple times, and he has been requested repeatedly. He doesn't like me, but he may come tomorrow, which means I get a different guy who, frankly, is just as good. His second year on the beat, Mike Curtis, Detroit News, beat writer for the Pistons. Welcome, man. Welcome for your Spiro Avenue debut, Mike Curtis.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm looking forward to it.
I've been, like I said, badgered about the lack of Pistons content, and I keep saying I want to do it, but these guys got to return my calls, and I'm like, I don't even think I've talked to Mike yet. Big fan of your work. I love what you've done so far, you know, going into your second year there. I'm fascinated to see where you're at with this because I have a pretty strong idea of my opinions on the Lions, the Tigers, very strong in one way. And, you know, Lions, Tigers, Red Wings, I feel good. Pistons, I don't know what to think. I've been all over the place. So you're going to be my doctor here. So you're going to be my unlicensed medical professional. I want to start here. And this is a recent change in our prep for tonight. Assar Thompson. I am pleasantly surprised with what I saw. 5th overall pick, really good showing in Summer League. Yeah, I know Summer League, all the asterisks and stuff. We understand that. I'm not going to go through that. Assar Thompson, what do you think from what you've seen so far? Early impressions, have you been surprised by what you've seen from him in the early going here?
Not at all. I think what you see from Assar is what you get. I think the Pistons already knew kind of what they wanted when they drafted him with the 5th pick. They're going to get a guy who's pretty much going to do it on both ends of the floor. We saw he defended well, he rebounded well, he scored when needed to. I think his feel for the game is particularly what sticks out. He looks like he's in control of kind of like every possession. And I think like his playmaking, like we saw last night, is pretty much what's going to keep him on the floor.
So you think Assar's the better brother is the
I'm not going to go
conclusion.
that far because there were chirpings that Amin was better than Assar. But when you take a look at just the total overall game, I think Assar is a good fit with the Pistons.
He seems like a Swiss Army knife, and I think the Andre Iguodala comp makes a lot of sense just from the very limited sample size where, like, big-time score, probably not. I don't rule anything out. You never know, but probably not, but good enough to be in that, 10 to 14 range that Iguodala was at his peak and just does so many other things, can pass, defend, rebound. Do you think that's a crazy comp? I know it's very, very small sample size of what we've seen, but do you see that sort of comparison being, ringing true to you?
Yeah, I know Troy Weaver was the first one to say he saw comparisons of Assar Thompson and Andre Iguodala, and when you take a look at what he's done in Summer League so far, I think it kind of fits that bill. I know the first game he was still filling everything out, playing behind Ivy, playing behind Duren, and then the second game, he tried to find his shot a little bit more. That shot fell flat more times than not. But in the third game, when he was the primary facilitator, he had control of the team pretty much. I think we saw him kind of be that Swiss Army knife.
He's similar somewhat. I'm not talking about the game at all. I'm talking about between the ears to Cade Cunningham. And that's what I like about what they're doing here, just big picture. And we'll talk about big picture a little bit later. Yeah. But he seems kind of like a Piston in the mold that they're going for, and when we've seen this thing work, where he's a hard worker, he's not making any waves, he's very good as a system guy and isn't going to cause problems. Like, you're never going to have to worry about, is that guy bringing it tonight, or is he going to be caught up in some controversy, that's going to be a distraction. He just seems like kind of an old soul, which I think Cade is as well. Does he seem to fit the personality, you think, or is that just sort of incidental? Do you think they weighed that when they made this decision at 5?
Yeah, one thing that Troy Weaver always kind of vets out with anyone he drafts is character, and also whoever he trades for. He wants to make sure that player is going to come into the team and kind of mesh with all the guys and not be a deterrent to what they've already kind of built. And I think Assar kind of fits that bill because, like you say, he's 20 years old and he's very respectful. He's very knowledgeable of the game. He's aware of the questions that are being asked. He doesn't do too much in pressers. He answers exactly what you ask him. So I think his character, from a character standpoint, he's not going to come in and try to say, "Oh, this is my team, I got to shine." I think he's going to kind of fit the mold of everyone else.
Do you get the vibe, as a brief digression, is this Cade Cunningham's team already. Is that sort of the feeling you get right now with where they're at?
Yeah, I think it's established that Cade is the focal point, the center of this rebuild, and I think that's why we didn't see a lot of like splashy signings in free agency. I think they're building around Cade with Ivy as the complement. You got the veterans in Burks, Bogdanovich, now Harris and Monte Morris. So I think they're trying to center everything around Cade. It's just going to be, is he going to be healthy enough to kind of shoulder the load?
And Ivy, he fits that aforementioned mold too. Another guy that you're never going to have to worry about that plays his ass off. So I don't think it's accidental or coincidence. Cade, he was the borderline consensus number one. That's fine, but there's some, ability to move around with other moves, and Weaver still seems to be fitting that pattern of looking for a certain guy. We can talk about whether Marvin Bagley fits that or not, maybe a little bit later. He's the only one where I was kind of like, yeah, really? I don't see that as a Weaver thing. But I know you saw the Dumars, because you quoted it on Twitter, the Dumars line mid-game with Assar Thompson yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you saw it. So for those that haven't seen it, Ben, can you roll that really quick? This is Joe Dumars during Summer League yesterday, just in awe of Assar Thompson.
It's still an enjoyable game for the people involved in it.
Absolutely. Corey, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Corey. Boy, this kid is good.
Yeah.
Anyway, boy, this kid is good, man. You're absolutely right. Now, the flopping.
So, Dumars interrupting himself to break it down. But I really, you can see, again, with all the caveats with the Summer League, we get it. But you can see what they like and how that guy plays. I don't know how high the ceiling is. Maybe it's high. I see him as a very high floor guy, though. There's no way, almost, as long as he's healthy, that kid's not pretty good, right? Is that a fair read on this?
Absolutely. Just by looking at that play, you see he was able to kind of use his speed to get past two defenders for a dunk. Maybe that's not there in the regular season. Maybe somebody rotates over, but then he'll have to make a quick decision on whether to continue to attack the paint or get his teammates involved. And based off what we've seen so far, I think he'll make the accurate read. But as far as his ceiling and his floor, like you said, I think he's only going to get better. And if he develops a formidable jump shot, if he's like league average from 3-point range, I think he'll be really, really good.
Yeah, you said it. Formidable, but then just even the league average part. I don't even need him to be formidable. It'd be great. If he can get to that like kind of 37, 38% range, anything above that would be awesome. But just be credible from there. That kid can really do almost everything at that point if he can develop that outside shot. That seems to be the one knock on him. He's obviously an incredible athlete. He plays his ass off on defense. It seems to be the one missing thing. And, they pointed out he got better in that overtime elite thing at the end. Like the percentage was ticking up. It still wasn't where you'd want it to be. But I think that was, I was between him and Whitmore. And, hindsight's 2020. I don't know. Whitmore looked pretty good. At the same token, that would have looked pretty silly knowing how much he tumbled if you had taken him at 5. But I feel like they got it right. Was there someone on the board where you thought, I don't know, I could have seen going for that guy instead of Assar? Or do you think this was a no-brainer, both in your mind but also in the mind of the Pistons?
Yeah, it's interesting because days before the draft, all the big boards had Whitmore, Jarris Walker. They said the Pistons could even go for a guy like Taylor Hendricks, who was pretty formidable on the defensive end, but I think they made the right selection so far with Assar, just seeing how he fits in from a character standpoint and with his play, because you don't want someone to come in who wants to take away from what they've already built. Like they have established Cade as the guy. They brought in Ivy to kind of complement, and now they have all these shooters that both those guys and Assar as playmakers can just dish it to because they're going to attract all the attention. And you got a guy in Duren who's a force in the middle. So I think they made the right selection at number 5.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. Again, my only one, I'm curious to see how the Whitmore thing plays out, because that was one of the curiosities of the draft as it unfolded. And everyone said, what's wrong with this kid? And it looks pretty good to me. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I know there was a health question, and I don't know if there was a character red flag. I don't know what that was about. But to me, it was always one of those two guys, not a big Jarris Walker guy. Summer League in general, you were out there for the front end of that out in Vegas.
Yeah.
I'm sure you saw some crazy stuff. I heard it's like one of the best times to go out there, and you just see, big time NBA guys like LeBron will be walking around at a casino, But the overall impressions, aside from Assar, was there anything Sasser, anything surprising you? Someone that looked better than you thought, not quite as good as you thought? What did you sort of take from that, aside from Assar in Vegas?
Yeah, Pistons-wise or?
Just straight Pistons-wise, yeah.
Okay, so when I took a look at Assar, this is pretty much my first time watching him play live. I caught him a little bit in spurts last season in Houston, but my first impression of watching him was this guy is a gamer, like on both ends of the floor. I think the way he's able to kind of get his own shot from three-point range, whether he's making them or not, he's going to take them. So I think as a defender, you got to respect it. And the Pistons don't have a lot of guys like that already who can kind of just manufacture their own shot from three-point range. So I think that's pretty good to see. And the way he was able to kind of distribute the ball yesterday, I think he ended up with maybe 7 or 8 assists. That's a bonus too, because you got guys like Killian Hayes, Ivy, Cunningham, but if you have another guy like Sasser who can get others involved, I think that bodes well.
So I mean, those late first round picks, I should say, for the NBA, it's not like the NFL. The hit rate is pretty low. I mean, do you think he's a decent bet to buck the trend? Not just to be clinging onto a roster for dear life for 5 years and then he's gone, but to be a real rotational guy on a functional, solid team. Does he seem like he could fit that?
It's funny because when you have 4-year guys come in, like a lot of them come in with the experience because they've been in different type of situations during college, whereas you have a guy that's one and done, they've only seen a tiny bit of college basketball. Now they're competing against pros. So I think that experience is going to help him. And I think particularly you saw it last night when he got the steal and got the layup to kind of get him to lead for good. Like after having such a struggling night offensively, for him to like kind of lock in defensively and then give his team the win, I think that said a lot about it.
I firmly believe with Assar, just putting a button on that, Assar is a guy that I said there's no way he fails, in my opinion. I would be stunned. Outside of that top, 2 or 3 guys in any given draft, there's not a whole lot of guys where I can't find some way that they fail in the league. I can't find it with that guy, and I think it's a really encouraging sign where even if it doesn't reach sort of the pinnacle and the peak of what we think it could, they got a good player. And this team, I mean, they were dead last in the league last year. They need good players, so I'm very encouraged by it just in general, and I thought it was an encouraging early showing from him, and he's an eyeball test guy. Assar's an eyeball test guy. Sasser, I don't know. I could just blindly bet against every guy that's taken outside of the lottery, and I'm going to have a really high hit rate, and I don't have to know who the player is. Just tell me where they were taken. It's so hard, but certainly worth the chance, and nothing odd about taking him. Was a hell of a player in college. I want to pivot to what I argue is by far the most important issue. I open with Assar because Assar was, dunking on guys 12 hours ago. But this is really the lead, and it's a little bit negative, which is another reason to go second.
Okay.
Concerning Cade Cunningham and my concerns with Cade Cunningham. Now, I'm going to phrase it like this. I have no doubts about the guy's game, no questions about him as a leader. In fact, the complete opposite on both counts. I love both. I love the guy as a leader. I think he's exactly what you want, made in a lab, never going to cause a problem, plays his ass off, unselfish. He checks every box there. I love his game. His old man game is just a textbook for me. I love that stuff. The above the rim stuff is great. I love that methodical. I'm a Michigan State guy. Cassius Winston was that, rock you and he'll kind of cradle you to death. I love everything about that. So put that aside. This is not a Cade Cunningham criticism for anything he can really control. But the injury thing, I would argue, is the least emphasized, most under-discussed topic with this team. I don't see how this isn't a more prominent issue, and it's not about you. Nobody's really talking about it. The writers, the fans, I'm a rare exception. So, Ben, can you throw up, just to get an idea of where we're at with the history in the very short time of Cade and the list of ailments that we've seen so far? Now, again, it's early, but these are facts. He has missed 88 games in 2 years, And I'm not too worried about the COVID, non-COVID illness stuff. I'm putting it up there for accuracy's sake, and he missed a couple of games between those two causes. But shin fracture, the big one, ankle sprain, wrist sprain, and a hip pointer. He has missed time significantly on the first count with the shin fracture. He has missed significant time with 4 separate injuries. And then, again, throw the COVID stuff, that's fine. But 4 injuries to varying extents in, it's not even 2 years. It was like 13 months in terms of an actual timeline. There's not a whole lot of track record here for this going well. And that's where we'll pivot to next. And then I'm going to get it back into your lap. But Ben, show the precedent of first overall picks that have missed this volume of games in the first 2 years. So I argue this is a reason to worry. Since going first overall in 2021, Cade has missed 54% of the Pistons games. And if you look at the history of guys in this league that went first overall and missed at least half of their team's games between years 1 and 2 combined, it's Zion Williamson, Markelle Fultz, Blake Griffin, Greg Oden, and Bill Walton. What do those 5 guys have in common? Their availability never got that great or had certain issues with it, to say the least. Now, for different reasons, Fultz had some between the ear stuff going on, Zion, maybe a little bit of both, but the bottom line is we are in this boat for only the 6th time in the history of this draft. The first 5 times, those guys had injury problems or availability issues their entire careers. Now, 2 of them are still active. It could, well, Blake, I guess, but 2 of them are still active. It could change. It's not a pretty picture. We're basically 0 for 5 where guys were missing all this time in years 1 and 2, and then suddenly they were healthy. We're 0 for 5. This will be number 6. Am I crazy? Am I a conspiracy theorist? Is the sample size too small? Talk me off the ledge here or push me over. Which one? Up to you. Mike, what do you think of this?
Yeah, those are pretty interesting numbers. The first thing that comes to mind is when Zion or when Cade is on the floor, look at their production. I mean, just simply with Cade, we saw him average almost 20 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists last season. Numbers up from his rookie year on one leg. And this is an injury with his shin fracture, who he just had surgically repaired. This is an injury that he's kind of been dealing with since high school. So the fact that he went ahead and took the time to kind of get it addressed, which will probably bode well for him in the long run, rather if he just rested on it and continued to play on it and probably would have had further injury to it. I think that's what separates himself. And I remember that I had a brief conversation with him. He was talking to all the beat writers in Vegas, and he was pretty much saying that Drew Holiday was one of the guys he talked to when deciding whether or not to get the surgery. And when you take a look at Drew Holiday, who had the same shin surgery, like, he's come back and he's still one of the best point guards in the league. But as far as like your graphic, another player I think about is Joel Embiid, who struggled with injuries earlier in his career, and now he's the league MVP. Granted, it took a few years to get there, but he's one of the most dominant players when healthy, when available. He still has his string of injuries every season.
Literally every season. Yes.
When he's available, you can count on you getting the best version of Joel Embiid.
Yeah, but I think Embiid, and obviously you understand he wasn't the first overall pick, which is why he wouldn't have been in there. He would have been had he been. But it's the league MVP. I'm not shit. I mean, it's awesome. But his availability still is a problem and an ongoing story. He was hurt. He played hurt, but he's hurt in the playoffs this year and was a limiting factor on the 76ers. Look, it's a 5-person sample size. Now 6. Cade is joining that list. It doesn't mean it scientifically proves that we're going to have these problems, but I don't know why no one's talking about it. 5 times, all 5 guys marred with injury and availability issues. I mean, Bill Walton was patched together with glue. Now, that was like 50 years ago. I don't understand why this isn't at least a concern to some extent. And you addressed the shin fracture thing. There's still 3 injuries left there. I mean, wrist sprain, not the end of the world, but he didn't play. I can look up Anthony Davis. He played 82 games, I think, the first year, 80 or 81. I mean, going through and researching this list, because the data is the data, but I manually compiled this. Yeah. The vast majority of guys they didn't miss time. They play 78 games in year 1 and 2. So even the smaller stuff, why should I feel confident that this is not going to be an ongoing problem, right? Is there some meat on that bone? No pun intended with his veganism.
I think a lot of people are really going to take a look at what Cade does this year before they kind of rule him out. And I think there has been a lot of people who've kind of forgotten what Cade's been able to do, partly because he only played 12 games last season and he played, 64 the year before. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does when he's fully healthy. Now, Troy Weaver kind of mentioned that he's going to come back strong. He said he's going to be back ready for training camp. So that's going to be the first thing I'm looking at. We saw him briefly in the Pistons pre-summer league practice. And as we were leaving, we kind of saw him drive to the basket for a dunk. And he looked pretty good there, but that's like, it's practice. No, it's not a real game, but I think he'll come back in a way that works for him. I want to say, like, maybe he won't be the same player. Maybe he'll like make different decisions on the court, but I think he'll come back strong.
Oh, he's not a guy like, Morant or Derrick Rose. He's not a guy where, he better start being more careful out there or he's going to get hurt. Or, Iverson, he didn't miss any games, but it's a miracle he didn't get hurt the way he played. He's already playing for lack of a better term, safe. It's not a reckless, driving with reckless abandon game to begin with. Yeah. I have no doubt that he's going to be good the second he gets back on the floor. That's not even my concern, or I don't have any concern about, is he robbed of athleticism? He wasn't that athletic to begin with relative to other guys in his demographic, first overall pick. But, is he going to be there for 75 games? I don't even need him for 82. It'd be great. I'd love that. I'm realistic. Most guys don't play that anymore. Yeah. But it's more about, can he stay out there? And nobody knows. There's no way for you to answer that well. I think it's an underreported, underdiscussed concern. I feel like I'm the cynic constantly, but I'm the only one really talking about, are we sure this guy's going to be out there? And if he's not available on a consistent basis, 70-plus games, this thing doesn't really work. This whole rebuild doesn't really work, right? He kind of has to be okay, right?
I think 75 is pretty high considering 82, and the league just changed.
I'll take 70.
The league just changed the minimum to 65 games in order to be eligible for postseason awards like MVP, Rookie of the Year, the All-NBA team. So I think that 65 number is something to strive for. Not everyone can play. People don't even play 82 games anymore. You probably got a handful, maybe under 10 players in the league that kind of can maintain that workload and play the full 82. But if he's able to get you to a point where you're back in the playoffs, I think he's somebody that you still should probably, build your roster around, because that's the main goal at this point. This team is trying to restore their image and get back to postseason contention for the first time since 2018, correct me if I'm wrong. But
the Blake Griffin year,
the Blake
he was
Griffin
like
year
fifth in MVP voting or something, and deservedly so. He dragged them to the finish line of that season. But
yeah, I think as long as he's able to kind of be there for the long run, because it's still early. They just won 17 games last year, and they're not no one's looking at them to win 40, 50 games next year. But like you said, you do want your star player to be healthy. So I think he just needs to get his legs back under him, and we'll see what he can do. Yeah,
I certainly wouldn't classify them as trapped with them. I still love him as a franchise guy, and there's no, should they not build around him? They have to. They should. It's the right move. So just to be clear, I just think, man, I wish I felt a little more confident in his availability, and we are one injury away, and it doesn't have to even be a major one. And I'm praying for no injury of any kind. But we are one injury away from this becoming a 5-alarm fire with his availability. We're one rolled ankle. And just as a Piston fan who's been tortured with poor basketball for a long time, I really, really want this to work. And I feel like I need someone to give me like a Linus blanket and a hug or something. So we'll pivot off this. Isaiah Stewart extension. Now, James Edwards and I were the two people that were all on the Isaiah train, I think, before anybody else. We wanted him before the draft. We loved him the second they drafted him. We are big Isaiah guys. and I haven't pivoted off that. The timing of this extension I thought was a little bit, not even bad, just interesting. My eyebrows went up. So let's quote you. So this is you in your article about Isaiah Stewart in the Detroit News. Quote, Isaiah Stewart is known as the heart and soul of the Pistons' young core, a phrase often cited by general manager Troy Weaver. He's one of the team's best defenders, and he's emerging as a threat from the perimeter. Stewart is the first Piston to receive a rookie extension since Tom Gores bought the team in 2011. 2 questions about how you phrased that. We'll start with this. The heart and soul of the Pistons' young core. Can you tell me why that's the case for Isaiah Stewart? What makes you say that he's the heart and soul of this team and this new sort of blossoming core?
Yeah, I think you see it on a nightly basis, whether he's playing, whether he's showing that heart and soul, that leadership with his voice, or whether he's showing it with his play. His presence is there. And I think it's because of the passion he plays with. I think it's because of the defensive intensity that he showed earlier in his career with Detroit before he kind of transitioned to the perimeter, and now he's knocking down threes. I think you know what you're gonna get from Stu on a nightly basis. And even last year, he showed the ability to kind of expand his game, where he was putting the ball on the floor before he got hurt with that shoulder injury. So he had a tough break last year with the shoulder injury, which kind of like allowed him to go into that slump during February, I think late January, and the entire month of February, where he struggled to shoot the 3. But I think that's the whole reason why he's the heart and soul of this team. Like when he sees a guy like Ivy kind of struggling, he's going over to put his arm around him and kind of encourage him and be a vet. Granted, they're similar in age. So I think that's why I wrote that, and why Troy Weaver has also said he's the heartbeat of that team. So,
I mean, you said he's hitting threes. What is he, like 31? You got the iPad.
Yeah.
What is he, like 31.8 or 32.3? I mean, he's not really.
It was, but
he was bad objectively from 3. I'm not saying atrocious, but I mean, you look at league average, he was way below that.
Yeah, 33% for the season.
Was it that high? Okay, but still.
Oh, I'm sorry, 33% as a rookie, 32% in his 3rd year. But he took 205, made 67 of them.
32% isn't good, though. I mean, if someone's shooting 32% from 3, I'm going to tell them knock it off. I mean, unless you're wide open, that's not good. It's not. But it doesn't mean he can't get better. But I don't think we can bank on that. I think his value, in terms of just the contract, he's definitely a rotational guy. He's a good player. I'm like the biggest Stewart. It sounds like I'm shitting on the guy. I'm a huge Stewart guy, and my track record demonstrates that. But the value of him and that contract is going to completely hinge, I would argue, on the 3-point shooting. I don't even need him good, but if he goes like to 36, he's going to be a steal. A guy that can hit a 3 at a good clip and bring the things to the table that he's already doing. But if he stays at that kind of low 30s, it's not a terrible contract if you've got a usable guy under $20 million at this point in this new CBA, and it's pretty, palatable. But I think this entire thing hinges on that one thing. Are you confident he can get to a point where he's in that, again, 35, 36% range?
Yeah, I would argue had he not got hurt, he would have been a 35, 36% three-point shooter. And I think we probably don't even need to look at the three-point shooting. I think we need to look at the collective that he brings to the floor. Like defensively, he's good around the rim once he's rolling. And I think we saw him kind of recently we saw him in practice practicing mid-range jumpers. If he's able to get that down, I think he'll be even more of a threat because he'll have the versatility in his offensive game and not just be a rim roller or a three-point shooter. He can kind of do a little bit of everything.
I see him as a dream, like kind of 7th guy on a championship team. I mean, that's not an insult. I mean, that's, like Bruce Brown. I mean, it's that kind of a guy, and Bruce Brown just got paid big and was a critical part of that team that just won in Denver. So it's not meant as an insult. That's a compliment where, if you're playing the 6th, 7th most minutes on a champion, you're probably doing something right. And that's how I see him, and that's a good guy to keep around. So I wasn't anti the extension. It just seems like it could go either way. It's either going to be a little bit of a cringe if he develops no three-point shot at all, if he does make even a small leap up in that category, it could be like a huge bargain, actually, which sounds crazy given the number, but you see what's going on in the league. These contracts are absurd, but I like them. I just think there's a lot sort of hinged on that one, demo. But the second part I wanted to jump into that, at the end of that quote from your article, you said that, you pointed out the fact that it's the first guy retained past his rookie contract since 2011.
Yeah.
Is there anything about him in particular that made him sort of buck that trend? Why did they feel like they had to have him big picture going forward? Why did Troy Weaver make this commitment to buck that trend finally?
Yeah, I think when you take a look at the bigs that they have on the roster, you have Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, James Wiseman, and Marvin Bagley. I think Stu is the one who probably is more versatile and can play the four, other than Wiseman and Bagley, who's still trying to find their way on the team. We see Wiseman played in summer league, and he looks a little bit more assertive. It was a small sample size last season with the Pistons. Played probably 22 games, averaged 12 points, 8 rebounds. But I think if he can show that he has the ability to shoot the three, then he'll be more valuable. Marvin Bagley, he also had a good stretch. He was injured for most of last season, but during the last month, he kind of showed flashes that he was able to kind of be that 5 in the second unit. And I think that's not a bad option if he's going against second unit 5s. But in terms of Duren is the future at center, I think that's what they believe. They're locking Stu down for 4 more years, and they're going to see who emerges as the better big between Wiseman and Bagley. And we'll see what happens.
I mean, I'm going to say one good thing about myself and then one bad thing so people don't think I'm braggadocious. The Duren thing, I called it. Look it up. I called that guy was going to be good. I was begging in real time for the Pistons to trade up for him when he started to fall. I wanted him before the draft, and I do my kind of big board, which no one cares about but like 6 people and me. But I had him way higher than everybody else. I was begging Weaver to go up and grab him, and he did. So I feel like I nailed him being at least good. I mean, we'll see about the ceiling. I was completely wrong about Wiseman. Maybe. I loved Wiseman before the draft. You can get into the whole center going that high, whatever. That's a different argument. Regardless of that, I thought Wiseman was going to be a hell of a player. And I thought it was great for him in that situation he was in, which I couldn't have been more wrong. It was like the terrible situation for him out in Golden State. What do you make of him and the compatibility specifically with Duren? Because it seems, Memphis thing aside, it seems sort of a redundant asset. Is that fair, unfair? What's your take?
It's interesting because they started them a handful of games last season, and we saw they started together in summer league, and it's kind of awkward when Wiseman isn't hitting the perimeter shot, and we saw Duren is taking a perimeter shot a little bit, trying to expand his game. That remains to be seen whether we'll see that in the regular season, but it's always good to see them try, I guess. But as far as Wiseman, I think you got a guy who can score in the interior. You got a guy who can rebound. And if he gets a formidable 3-point shot, or maybe even a mid-range shot, he'll be able to let Wiseman command the paint, and they'll be able to complement each other. Right now, it doesn't look particularly the best, but they are like building chemistry. Like we saw Duren attract 2 defenders, dish it off to Wiseman for a dunk. And I think the same happened in the game against Houston, where Wiseman returned the favor. So they're kind of gaining some chemistry passing wise, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Do you get the sense, because one of the criticisms of Weaver, fair or not, is he's just stockpiling other failed projects, Bagley, Wiseman. Do you get the feeling that Weaver is just trying to buy up some lotto tickets and hope that one of them hits? Because I would argue if Duren and Wiseman are both good, which is, I think Duren's already good, but let's say they both end up clearly, starting caliber players in the NBA, he's just going to trade them. There's no compatibility there, but just as a general, in my opinion, in a general fashion though, does Weaver see something in Wiseman where I really like that guy, or Bagley, I really like that guy? Or do you think there's some merit to the criticism of, oh, this guy's just going up and grabbing every second overall pick that didn't work out? What's your take on that as a general matter in Weaver's philosophy?
Yeah, not Weaver, but Wiseman's going to be due for also his rookie extension coming up soon. So I think this next year with the Pistons is going to be very crucial. And he's going to be coming out with a point to prove. He wants to prove to everyone that he belongs in this league. He wants to prove why he was taken number 2 overall in 2020. I think Weaver does believe in him. He does have that confidence in him. But Wiseman just need reps. He's been hurt for the majority of his career, and I think this is one of the first off seasons where he's completely healthy, clean slate, and he'll be able to show what he can do with this team.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I didn't see the game that these two guys were talking about, but Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo, both from the Ringer, were talking about a game that Wiseman had been playing in, and his body language, and that they honestly felt bad for him. And they said that was their impression from watching him at large, not just in that one game, but they had a back and forth a few months back. I think it was right after the trade to the Pistons, where they felt that, man, this guy does have something there, but it was like a pity thing where they felt this guy just didn't really get a chance to play and was set up to fail. And they like him, but they wonder if he can get that confidence back, or if there's some portion of that that's irretrievable. You're covering this guy. This is your beat. Like, you're around him. Between the ears, I don't care about his game as much in this context, but between the ears, is he a guy that's coming in, chip on the shoulder? Is he shoulder slumped? Is he moping around? Is he engaged? What's your sort of dime store psychology read on him?
Yeah, I actually asked him if he plays with a lot of emotion. So I asked him after the last game that he played, like, are you playing with a chip on your shoulder? And he said absolutely. So he cares. He wants to be good. I don't think it affects him to the point where it's mental. He has to take a break from basketball. He's thinking more than he's reacting. I think it's just the fact that he wants to be good. We see Jaden Ivey kind of show that same emotion throughout last season. He wants to be good. He doesn't want to lose. And I think that's just kind of the gist of it.
So I have not buried anybody on this show yet on this roster. But I'm going to break that trend now. And this, when you have strong opinions and you do a show at least once a week, there's going to be some exposure to liability there. So maybe this will come and blow me up. And it's going to blow up in my face, and people will make fun of me. Whatever. You're more fair and rational than I am, probably. The Killian Hayes thing. It's not going to work. And it didn't work. And this is one I got wrong. I wanted him. I was big. The Ringer had him number 1 in the entire draft on their board, and that's not the only reason I liked him. I liked a lot of how he profiled. It has not worked. I think we can already affirmatively say not taking Tyrese Haliburton was a mistake. That's one of those where, not me, I got it wrong, just like the Pistons did. The fans, for the most part, seem to have wanted Haliburton. Now you can get into the whole, they wouldn't have gotten Cade, whatever. But I'm just talking in a vacuum. They screwed it up. And I don't know, did you see what Haliburton said about the Pistons? I will maybe start there, about wanting to come here. Ben, can you throw Tyrese Haliburton on, I can't even remember what show it was. I feel I'm a bad journalist today. The Haliburton clip talking about the Pistons thinking they were going to take him and wanting to go there.
I told the Cavs and the Hawks, don't pick me. Please don't pick me. Yeah. I thought the Pistons might, and that's kind of where I wanted to go. They took a different direction and went Killian.
So that hurts, because he actually wanted to come here. Am I crazy? Take Haliburton out of it. Just this Killian Hayes thing in general, it's not going to work, right? What's your take?
I think it's going to be tough, especially with all the guards that they have on the roster. You have Cade, you have Jaden, you have Monte Morris, you have Marcus Sasser now, and now you have Killian Hayes. So that's 5 guards who can dominate the ball and play point at any given time. 4 of those 5 guards have the ability to spread the floor and shoot from 3-point range, which you want in a point guard. Killian averaged career highs last season, but I think it's because he had more responsibility playing the starting role in absence of Cade Cunningham. So I think he had a shot to kind of show what he can do. But he's a he's a really good on-ball defender as far as from the point guard perspective, but the shooting hasn't been there. And I think that's his kind of Achilles heel. And the Pistons need shooting, which is why they went out and got Monte Morris and Joe Harris and re-signed Bogey last season and Alec Burks. So you have the shooting there. It's going to be interesting to see how that point guard battle fits and where he lands on the depth chart. If Monty Williams like gives him a fair shot to kind of assert himself in the roster.
I think it's done here, and that and that's what I want to clarify. I would be surprised if he doesn't latch on somewhere down the road and at least become functional. Mm-hmm. There are guys, it's hard to make it as a guard if you can't shoot it all in this league, but it's not impossible. There are guys that do it in a backup role and all that. So I think he'll have a career. There's enough there. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think he's got it. And I mean, you said, his numbers are up, but you acknowledge that's a function of opportunity. I mean, Frank Jackson almost spoiled the Pistons lottery odds 2 years ago. Was going off for like 33-point games. He couldn't find anyone to take them. If you play, you're going to produce. Like anybody that's good enough to be on an NBA roster, if you're taking shots and you're out there 35 minutes, your numbers are going to be at least functional in terms of the counting numbers. So I'm actually surprised you were more strong on this thing is not going to work train than I thought. But people seem to be clinging on, at least in the fan base, to this thing working. Everything Weaver's done, and you stole my thunder. You kind of laid out all the reasons why. Everything that Weaver's done has pointed to he's kind of out on him too. Finishing on Killian there, do you think Weaver's with you and I on this where probably moving on from him? There's not going to be a second contract here for Killian, right?
I can't speak for Troy, of course, but based on the moves, I can only speak to what's been done transactionally. There are 5 guards on the roster, and
the tea leaves aren't looking good, man, for him.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, the fan base is going to be in shambles. So I like Wiseman, by the way. So finishing on a positive thing there, I like Wiseman. I have a soft spot in my heart for him. The Bagley thing, though, which is obviously a different offseason that was the preceding. Yeah, I don't know like where that goes. Like real quick on Bagley, do you think he's a key part of what Weaver's trying to do here?
I think he'll get a shot. I think you have four bigs on the roster, and I think it's all about competition. Like we were just discussing with Killian, whoever rises, whichever cream rises to the top, that's who's going to be on the roster when this thing really gets going. And I know what Bagley's had his injury history, so if he's able to stay healthy, I think he can be a functional member of his team. But I think it all depends on health.
I mean, talk about scoring around the basket. Bagley, for whatever you want to say about him, rebounding, defense, whatever criticism anyone wants to throw, that guy is, as the kids say, a bucket around the rim. I just feel like that guy could roll out of bed and give you like 15 if he gets the touches. I love his offensive game. The other limitations are somewhat debilitating, I think, in terms of his ceiling. I'd rather bank on Wiseman, but kind of what you're saying is, cream rising to the top. It does seem like whether it's a criticism or just an observation of the strategy, I agree with the people that say Troy Weaver is stockpiling high pedigree guys and hoping one of them works out. Not blindly hoping, but I don't think he even thinks all these guys are going to pan out, to the best potential. But and I guess we'll pivot there to Troy Weaver sort of at large and just where you're at with him. Now, you mentioned early on, look at all these shooters that are all over the place in regards to Cade. You said, they're surrounding him with all these shooters. Mm-hmm. Pistons Twitter is very mad at me. I'm in the doghouse, so that's partly why I brought you in here, because they've been yelling at me, calling me names, but also saying, hey, when's your next Pistons show? It's been a long time. I did a reaction show or whatever, post-draft show, and said, Assar Thompson, I'm in. My question was, and I was just crucified for asking it, was, is it wise to build your entire core on guys that either can't shoot or there's no evidence that they can shoot from three at a high level? I'm not saying bad, at a high level. You talk about they acquired Joe Harris, great. Mm-hmm. Burks is on the roster still, great. You can talk about Morris, great, no problem. That's you can get those guys in your sleep. Joe Harris, you can sign Joe Harris tomorrow. Bogdanovich, obviously an awesome 3-point shooter. There'll be 10 of those guys available for anybody that wants to pay him $20 or $19 million next year when he's a free agent. Or 2 years from now. I don't think that's an argument for why this works. You have to look at what champions have in this era. You can't have nobody in your core four a good three-point shooter. In the modern era, it just hasn't happened. And usually there's 2 or 3 guys of your core four that are at that number where they're 38%, 40%, 41%. I don't see this working without growth internally. And you have Cade Cunningham this is just objective where their percentage is at. Cade Cunningham below league average from 3. Ivy, not way below, but a little bit below league average from 3. He's a rookie, doesn't bury him, but that's a fact. Assar Thompson, 29 and some change percent in the overtime elite league. And then Duren, I don't think he's even planning to make threes like a big part of his game. If he is, that's completely unproven. So I got 4. First of all, is it fair that those are the core 4? Is that fair? Assar Thompson, Duren, Cade, and Ivy. Is that fair to start?
Yeah, I would go there since they're the integral parts of the previous few drafts.
Yes. So obviously that can change. But as we sit here right now, the core 4, we don't have one guy that's been a demonstrable league average shooter from 3, right? That's a fact, right?
That's fair to say.
Does that concern you in 2023, 2024, having what we've admitted is the core 4? We don't have one guy that we know can shoot even average. I'm not even saying good, average from 3. Am I paranoid? Is there some merit to that at all?
Do you think, let me ask you this, do you think Assar is going to start?
Whether or not he starts, he's one of the 4 most critical players. I don't know. Right. I mean, starting his rookie year, probably not.
Right.
So no, but I think he's big picture. I'm not talking about winning the title this year. I'm talking about the big plan.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a starter eventually, and he's going to be one of the 4 most important guys. So I don't mean to cop out, but that's just to clarify. But no, but when they plan to be good, yes.
Yeah, I think you're going to have shooters surrounding all of those guys, and just natural development. I think 3-point shots can improve. I think it just takes a lot of guys that are young. It takes them a while to get used to the NBA 3-point line. And I think that's probably what you're seeing with a lot of these guys. So as long as they're able to do what they do best, and that's facilitate, get to the hole, kick it out to shooters, I think that's a pretty good plan. Because when you take a look at the last rebuild for the Pistons, when you bring in all these free agents, overpaying them, and pretty much trying to buy your way to a championship or back to the playoffs, I don't think fans were pretty happy with that type of rebuild. So I think the Pistons are taking their time and being selective with who they're bringing into the organization and trying to get them back in the postseason. So I would prefer this approach. I know it's taking a long time. If you're a Pistons fan, you're probably like, when is this thing going to get rolling? Like you saw the Cleveland Cavaliers go from 22 wins to 44 wins a season ago or 2 seasons ago. And you saw Orlando kind of get close to making the play-in tournament last season. When you take a look at Orlando's roster, you got Paolo Banchero, you got Mo Wagner, you got Cole Anthony and Markelle Fultz.
And Franz. I mean, Franz is the better. You forgot the better Wagner.
Yeah. So Paolo isn't the best shooter, but I think the Magic are building around Paolo. So it's only a matter of time before we see kind of Cade make the switch and kind of get used to the 3-point line, and those shooting numbers increase.
Yeah, I would bet strongly that at least one of those 4 is going to be league average from 3 at some point. So I'm not betting against it, but it's all comparative. The bottom line is you're coming to the table with 4 guys, your core 4, none of which are demonstrable average 3-point shooters. So yeah, 1 or 2 of them might be, but you're still, I couldn't find another team in the league that fits this description. The Nuggets, obviously, extreme example because they were the literal champions, but I'm not in the business of winning 40 games. I want to build a championship roster here. Their 6th best 3-point shooter last year, their 6th, is better than anybody the Pistons have had in that core 4. What they've demonstrated. Now, one's a rookie, but even if I'm taking their overtime elite numbers, their 6th best guy is better than any of these 4 guys from what we've seen. Granted, they're young. I get that. The whole, they've added shooters. Every team can add those guys anytime. My friends Greg Waddell and David Klein, who, are smart basketball guys and know more about the game than I do, but they're saying, oh, so you were saying they weren't going to address the shooting. They drafted Sasser. They got Joe Harris. Joe Harris is an albatross that nobody wants at that number. That was an asset you basically got for future cap space. And Sasser was a late first-round pick. If that was so valuable, anyone could have had him earlier. I'm not saying that those guys, Sasser's going to be a bad NBA player, but you can easily find some guy that'll hit you threes. Those guys are always out there. You have to have a star or borderline star hit at a high rate in this league, in this era. There's no way around it. So you can say, oh, yeah, they got Harris, they got Sasser. Are either of those guys going to be on the floor in an NBA Finals game and not embarrass you if they do stumble out there due to foul trouble? No. Harris is unplayable defensively. He's unplayable. He's one of the 5 worst defensive players I've ever seen in my life. So great, you added shooting. You can't use them. A real team can't use them. So I get that you can add these guys, and they'll you Google their box score and they hit a lot of threes, but you have to have it in the core. So again, it sounds cynical. I'm somewhat dubious that it gets there, but you're smiling. You think I'm crazy a little bit. Am I totally out of left field here with this?
I don't think you're completely off, but I'm just saying that when you take a look at a guy like Giannis, who struggled mightily with his 3-point shot entering the league, and he's still trying to figure out a way to kind of play to that perimeter a little bit, but he plays to his strengths. He drives to the basket. He gets his teammates involved. He gets to the free throw line. I think you want a guy who's going to play to his strengths and not try to play to his weaknesses, because that's pretty much what you drafted that guy to do.
I mean, I didn't look this up in advance because I didn't know. I mean, it's a good example in terms of an individual, but weren't Middleton and Drew Holiday pretty good 3-point shooters that year? I mean, Middleton. So I don't need any one of them in a vacuum I don't need all 4 of them to become good at NBA 3-point shooters, but I need 1 or 2 of them to. And again, it could happen. It could absolutely happen. I think it's actually, in fact, likely that happens. But even if one of them does and they become above average, that's still way behind the 8 ball. 2, if you go 2 out of 4, and really to me it's 2 out of 3. I don't think Duren really projects as a good 3-point shooter. So you got to go 2 for 3. And even if that happens, that's the bare minimum in 2023, 24. Yeah. So I don't see these guys as a core that works as a finals team, Eastern Conference finals team. And people can roll their eyes all they want, but I don't care about 40 wins. I've seen this team in 08, 18. I've seen this movie where they win 40 games, 42 games, and get just blasted in the first round. Who cares? That's not how I'm building my team. I'm trying to build a contender at least. It's hard to build a champion, but a viable team. I don't see it happening. And if it does, even though it's possible, you're behind the 8 ball. You just are. Like, I'd rather show up to the party with 2 guys that I know can shoot versus 4 and they're all question marks. I mean, you can say what you want. I'm a cynic. Now, here's where I am the biggest Troy Weaver fan, and you touched on it. Okay. These people that are ripping Troy Weaver has done exactly what I begged him to do and what I've begged this organization to do forever. And you can have whatever opinion you want on tanking. His general structure for bottoming out, tanking, I don't care what you call it. Don't you think that was the right way to go? Weren't we spinning our wheels before Troy Weaver? I know you were down in Tennessee and laughing at Michigan State, blowing it to your alma mater in the NCAA tournament. But, I mean, I would argue he's set up things properly. It's just a matter of the subsequent steps. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It's interesting this year because it feels like they were running into an unprecedented amount of injuries. And when it came down to it, starting with Cade, Bagley was out for a minute. Isaiah Stewart got hurt. Killian got hurt around the Paris game. Ivy hurt his knee early on, but he still managed to play for the majority of the season. Duren's ankles had bilateral ankle injuries towards the end. Bogey had Achilles. And, you could say they positioned themselves to lose, but the end goal was a generational talent in Victor Wembanyama. I think we've seen teams do less and try to lose more games when you're trying to get a guy like that. So, and we've seen what Victor did in the summer league. So he had a tough game, tough first game, but then he kind of rebounded in the second game. So I think the way they're building, I don't think they want to be in a lottery again in the next 2 years.
So you think it's go time in terms of competing?
I think in terms of they want to steer this ship around and not win 17 games, maybe double that next season and then try to go for it. I think that's the direction they're kind of looking in. Because when you look at next year's free agency class, I think one of the jewels of it is going to be Jaylen Brown. Can you get a guy like Jaylen Brown to come to Detroit? Who knows? But I think that's a pretty good piece to look at when you're building.
If this team is healthy, namely Cade, and they just sign Jaylen Brown next offseason, that team could be an NBA champion, honestly, if Cade Cunningham is healthy and reaches his potential. I mean, if you really break it down, if I have a star in Jaylen Brown who's an All-NBA guy, a top 10 guy in the league, I think he was second-team All-NBA, he's a top 10 guy in the league.
Yeah.
Cade, I think, has All-NBA potential, absolutely, top 15, even if it's third team. So now I got 2 top 15 guys and all these other guys we like, Assar and Duran, et cetera. So that's where I don't think it's as far away, and that's why I think, obviously you wouldn't have Assar and one of these guys, but the lottery thing really hurt. And as much as we all want to yell at Weaver, Weaver's the reason Cade's here. Weaver's the reason that Ivy's here. Now, I know it doesn't take much to bottom out. Anyone could do it. Guess what? We spent over a decade not doing it, so I'm still going to give them a high five for that. But if they had won the lottery or even ended up third, anywhere in the top 3, this whole thing is different, right? If they have Scoot Henderson, I was a Scoot guy over Miller. I don't know where you were on that one, but I feel like this thing is a completely different feel if they have certainly Victor, but Scoot Henderson, and that's not Weaver's fault. He had him in the pole position, 52% to get one of those 3 guys. Yeah. Don't you think that was kind of a hit, even if we really like Assar?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to be in that. And Weaver kind of stated this in his post-lottery comments. Like, there were 3 tiers. There was the one tier with Victor. There was the next tier that appeared to be Scoot or Brandon Miller. And then there was kind of the rest of the field, which was kind of filled with a lot of guys you could put at the wing. So the Pistons had their choice to kind of pick from any of those wings, or they could trade down, try to get a veteran. And I think they looked at Assar as someone who can be an integral part of this roster, especially when you look at everything he brings from a versatility standpoint.
Did you see some of Scoot when you were out there in Vegas?
I missed the first half of the first game before he got hurt.
Okay, yeah.
So I got there right when he got hurt.
So but you were the bad juju, maybe. I don't know. I mean, granted, it was like a flicker. That guy, I'm praying on his health just for the good of the league. I loved Scoot from the beginning. I am really, really high on him now. I think that guy's going to be an absolute star, and he would have been my second pick over Miller, who went second. But I just think that was a huge setback, and that's the defense of Troy Weaver, where it's the lottery. All I can do is ask to be in that position. And if they landed Scoot, and certainly if they had landed Victor, I said it, people thought I was nuts. If they had gotten Victor, I think this team is in the finals in 2 years. Like Victor's third year, I mean. So whether you call it 2 years or 3 years. That's where I think that timeline was. And, when can we say that about the Pistons or any team in Detroit, frankly? So that's the defensive Weaver. He still has a way out of this, but they have to add someone big. I don't know. I mean, Jaylen Brown might be a pipe dream. Jaylen Brown seems like a guy, though. He might actually take the Pistons' money, which we never see here with this franchise for the marquee guys. Mm-hmm. And, I know you're not a Celtics beat guy, but is it that absurd that he might come here? He felt disrespected by all accounts, Kevin Durant rumors last offseason. He's got a little bit of a tension there with Boston. Somehow that extension still hasn't happened. We've been hearing about it, how it was inevitable for 3 weeks now. I don't think that's crazy that they could sign Jaylen Brown next year, like make a run at him. I'm not predicting it, but it's not absurd, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. When you take a look at Jaylen Brown and the type of player he is, and I think he wants to win. So if he sees an opportunity where he can come in and help a young team, he's been on a young team before. He played with Jason Tatum and kind of went through, and Kyrie Irving kind of went through those rookie first year, second year woes. He's been to the finals. He brings that experience with him, and he can bring that to a young team that he can kind of be a veteran on. I think that's an opportunity that he could possibly look at. I'm not sure if he's looking to go to a contender or go to a rebuilding team, but it's a scenario. It's a possibility.
I just think he's one of those guys where he's not quite good enough that all the Lakers aren't going to make him their guy to replace LeBron. So he's not quite good enough to be that guy in one of these highly desirable markets, the teams and the brands everyone wants to play for. But, he has enough of that sort of chip on the shoulder wanting to, prove Boston wrong for doubting him and their dalliance with Durant. I just think he's at that top tier of what the Pistons could sign. Again, not predicting it, but I don't think it's absurd, especially as this drags on. At the Boston thing, that might be dead. I don't have any Celtics insider information, but you mentioned, I was actually going to mention Jaylen Brown before you mentioned it earlier. That's the one where I could see it happening, and this whole thing blossoms, and they could be very good very fast. We've done the entire show, and we'll finish here without even mentioning one of the most critical elements, Monty Williams. Mm-hmm. Monty Williams was bribed out of, not retirement, but out of a year off is my take. I don't think he wanted to coach for a year. I think he wanted to sit out. He rejected the Pistons' initial overture, which was still quite lucrative from my understanding. Why do you think they identified this guy as someone that we're going to make the highest paid coach in the history of this league? He wants to take a year off. We're going to force him to reject a deal that he can't really refuse. Why was that important to the Pistons? Why is Monty the right guy to make that big of an offer for?
I think when you take a look at Monty Williams' history in terms of developing young teams, he took a team, a Phoenix Suns team that won 17 games, and within 3 years got them to the NBA Finals. Granted, you got a star talent in Devin Booker, but you had to surround him with, and you had DeAndre Ayton, but you had to surround that team and those two players with guys who would work, who could be molded, who could be developed. And I think that's what they see in Monty, his defensive instincts or his defensive schemes. I think you want a guy like that who can kind of like relate to the players. I think you want a guy who can get the best out of them. And everything I hear about Monty, more than anything basketball related, is he's a good guy. And that's what Troy Weaver is trying to build character-wise. So I think it's a reflection of the team he's trying to build. I think that's the coach they wanted. They didn't want a first-time coach coaching young players, from what I've been told. I think that when you get a guy like Monty, you gotta go hard for him, and they gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. And yeah, Monty's in Detroit, so we'll see how he does. Obviously, it's a 6-year deal, but I'm interested in seeing what happens specifically in these first 3.
Well, everyone made fun of me for saying Budenholzer was my preference, but it was by a hair. I was thrilled, would have been thrilled with either one, and I was thrilled that they got Monty Williams. I think the whole, but he had Devin Booker. What coach makes the NBA Finals without that kind of guy? The best argument is Eric Spoelstra with the Heat. If you want to put Jimmy Butler in that tier or not, that's a debate. But that's the best coach in the league, Eric Spoelstra, in my opinion. So other than him, these guys are all these teams at that level have really good players. So I dismiss but he had Booker and Chris Paul or whatever. You got to have players to get to that level. Yeah. The concern a little bit is the getting completely blown out twice. I think both games at home in the last 2 playoff runs as favorites. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to the point where we're winning 55 games and we're hosting a game 7, maybe. I mean, we'll see. But I think he was such a home run. The argument for him is, I don't know that there's a whole lot of discounts going on in the NBA. I think it's mostly guys taking top dollar, but for whatever extent you can sort of steal an advantage, he's the number 1 players coach in the league, I would argue. Is that fair?
Yeah. Everyone I've spoken to always talks about his relatability. He was a assistant coach on Mike Krzyzewski's coaching staff in Team USA. I actually spoke to Coach Cade and Jim Boeheim, and they both said that Monty was one of the best guys to be around just because he was able to relate with you about family, about basketball, just about life in general. And I think that bodes well for when you have a young team who kind of needs someone to kind of rely on like that.
I mean, Chris Paul said that Monty made him a better player in their first stint together and credits him and loves him. And Chris Paul doesn't like anybody. So it's like if Chris Paul is giving you credit for his game at all, and I don't think he's a bad guy, but he's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way over the years and he's polarizing. I think like if Chris Paul can get on board, the track record with point guards, I think it was a home run hire. I'm really interested to see what they do. The only component of me at all that is a little bit curious is there an engine gasoline problem there with Monty where you didn't really want this job? You didn't even want any job at this point. I think he may have needed a year off. And is it like a Jim Leland with the Rockies thing where, he's this coveted guy, he wanted a year off, but the team bribes him and it's 1 year. John Tortorella, if you're a hockey fan out there, same thing in Vancouver, gets fired by the Rangers. They make him a big offer. He wanted to take a year off. He didn't. He regretted it. He flamed out. We have seen these cases in other sports, and I'm sure there's NBA examples too, where they make you an offer you can't refuse, and you're just not in it. But I mean, he's a pro's pro. I don't. Have you talked to Monty since the hire? I know you've mostly been away from the team, and he's not out there in Vegas. I don't think. But.
Yeah, not briefly. I haven't having a one-on-one conversation with him, but every time I see him, I go up, shake his hand. He's extremely personable. But he was in Vegas.
He was. Okay.
Yeah, he was sitting courtside for the 2 games that I was at, and I think he was there last night because we saw the meme, or not the meme, but the video.
That's right.
Troy Weaver on the phone.
Yep.
Yeah, he's right. He was right next to him.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So you're with your limited exposure to him so far since he's been here. I mean, you're even read from afar is not. Oh, this guy's going to be disengaged. I think. I'm not even saying I'm worried about it, but if I'm making the argument of I could see this not going well. I never like, making an offer to a guy that just didn't even really want to be there, but he has to say yes, just in general, whether it's a player, coach, even in business. I think that exposes you to a little bit of risk, but you don't seem to think that's a concern at all.
I think what stands out is he mentioned this in his introductory presser. He came here for the players because he really likes this group. He really likes Duran. He likes Assar. And he's been complimentary of Cade and Ivy and a lot of other guys. But his relationship with Troy Weaver. They go back to their days in Oklahoma City. And I think anytime you have that history, that can kind of get you through the tough times when you're probably going on a X amount game losing streak. But you're able to kind of rely on somebody you've known for several years to kind of get you through that.
So we'll finish here. I know you're a reporter and a damn good one, and you're out of the columnist basket. You're not there, but I want you to put your columnist hat on because you're a smart, insightful guy. The Troy Weaver momentum in the fan base is starting to wane a little bit. Not among all. Even I'm still defending them in most regards. He did exactly what I wanted to do. They got bad lottery luck. We'll figure it out hopefully. But put the columnist hat on. Close here. Make the argument to the people that are yelling at me, my friends in my DMs. My boy Cali Tickets is always harassing me about defending Troy Weaver too much. Make the argument for why Troy Weaver is the right guy to not just get them squeaking into the playoffs at some point, but getting this team back to a championship standard, if not crossing that finish line. What is the case for Troy Weaver? We'll finish there.
I think when you look at what Troy has done since he got here, it's in his first year, he literally cleaned house. In terms of trading out guys that he didn't see belonged. We saw even last season, he traded Sadiq Bey to get James Wiseman. I think when you look at that trade, you're going for upside. I think we saw Sadiq had probably hit his peak just because he was a shooter. He wanted to do a little bit more to diversifying his game. But when you look at Wiseman, if he becomes the player that a lot of people think he's capable of being, then that's a home run. And you got to make that trade 10 times out of 10. So I think Troy is willing to make the difficult decisions and make the right adjustments to get the roster to where he thinks it needs to go. When you just look at his right before training camp deal to land Bojan Bogdanovic, where do you think this team would have been without Bogey? Granted, they won 17 games, but on most nights, Bogey was pretty much the engine to that offense, especially in the first and third quarters. And he would get into a zone where he's making 4 or 5 threes in a row. So I think he knows what this team needs in the long run, and I think he's carefully plotting out the steps he's going to take to maybe get them back to the playoffs.
Well said. Great job. That was a great answer. Unrehearsed, too. Just that's why you're a pro, man. I am still on the pro Troy Weaver side, by the way. I come off as a cynic sometimes. I'm a little bit rattled by some of the things, but again, if the guy does, I'm talking strictly for me, if the guy does exactly what I've been asking every Pistons executive to do for 12 years, I'm not going to crush him because the lotto ball didn't fall right. I like his approach. His reputation as a scout that's pretty much unassailable in like his prior days too. Mm-hmm. I still like Troy Weaver. So sorry, I'm going to get yelled at by some of you, and Cali Tickets is going to be mad at me. But I still like Troy Weaver. I still like what they're doing. This next year is going to be big. Great job by you, man. I really appreciate it. Your work's awesome at the Detroit News. I always tell people, subscribe. You guys are the best deal in town. Like the News and Free Press, like a few bucks a month. You guys have specials going on all the time, and your work is just awesome. I'm really glad that you're back in your home state. You're a Saginaw guy, just like Draymond Green. So you were down in Tennessee laughing at Michigan State in 2016, but it's good to have you back here in town covering this team. You're doing a great job, and I really appreciate you joining us, man. Thank you.
Man, appreciate the invite. This is really fun. Hopefully I can be back. And we'll see what happens next season. I think it's going to be an exciting one. I'm just excited to cover it.
You're doing an awesome job. Tell your colleague at the Rival Athletic, James Edwards III, to stop leaving me on red. I feel like a desperate girlfriend. I'd love to have like both you guys in here at the same time, maybe like kind of do a panel thing. I think that'd be really interesting. You guys both have great perspectives and really can't recommend your work highly enough.
Nah, James is a busy man. I'm sure he'll find time to.
He's playing softball right now. Like the guy's like curing cancer or something. I said, why can't you ever do our Thursday show? He goes, I got softball, bro. He's not that big. I mean, he's busy, but it's it's stuff he wants to do. But I have needs, man. He hasn't been here in 3 years, and I love the guy. He's got you got to get in his ear and force him. Tell him I'm ill and I'm dying in a year or something. Whatever you got to do to get him to the table. But you're awesome, man. Seriously, and I appreciate you joining us. And you said you hope to come back, man. I'm honored that you said that, because I'm always wondering if people are going to go home and be like, I'm never coming back. You're welcome anytime. I'd love to have you maybe right on the eve of the season or early on, and we can revisit that. But great job by you. Great debut. Ben, great job as always. Eric, Boxer's Couch, you know the deal. Thanks. So hopefully there were no cords that you're going to be mad about. Mike Curtis, Detroit News, Pistons beat writer. Great to have you. Spiro Avenue Show. Thank you.
Thank you.